Thanks for having me, Salim. I think the framing is this, and you're going to go into this over the next 3 days, probably fairly extensively. Technology is deflationary, and that's not a guess. It's technology is deflationary. It makes things more efficient and more abundant, and we see it everywhere. I'm on the boards of many technology companies. Most of them, and with this COVID response, are actually growing faster. So COVID actually accelerates technology growth, and that destroys jobs. It's more, and so against that backdrop, because we grew up in an inflationary environment, we can't see that the deflationary environment might actually be a good thing. So what governments are doing is trying to stop deflation at all costs. And so the numbers you pointed out, we've actually had $185 trillion of global easing or debt creation in the last 20 years to produce $46 trillion of GDP growth per year. But that's looking backwards. That's when I wrote the book, and the book came out this year. Looking forwards, debt is exploding because we're trying to inflate away a structural problem and a structural or a structural opportunity. Technology, we are not going to put technology back. The genie's not getting back in the bottle, right? So by trying to fight that, we're driving dislocation into societies at an alarming rate, because you're just pulling demand forward, but you're actually artificially increasing asset prices.
So because you're deflating the currencies by printing a lot more of it, you have to spend a lot more for anything that you do. So essentially, we're reducing the value of everybody's money and income and everything.
Exactly. So sometimes it's easier to see in an example, right? We actually we all celebrate the technology we use, and all of the monopolies today are created from that same thing, deflationary like abundance. Look at your cell phone today. My first cell phone in 1987 cost me $2,000. All it did is made phone calls, and my first bill was $1,200 a month. My cell phone today, every app on it is free. I have abundance sitting in my hand, and it costs me $50 a month. And then there's a lineup around the store when a new cell phone comes out, when Apple releases a new phone. So it's not deflation like we used to see deflation, and governments are scared about. It brings us to abundance. But and remember, that price that I pay for the cell phone is against trying to make currencies worthless through inflation. So if you looked at the real cost of the cell phone, what it's actually fallen against in the last 20 or so years, it's staggering. It's just staggering. And that abundance, whether it's Google searches or it's everything else, we're celebrating that in using, but it's not getting to all society, and it's not getting to all things, because we're artificially propping up asset prices, right? So if you print money into that environment when things want to fall, then, or if you pull demand forward by creating debt that can never be repaid, then the money has to find a home it's trying to find a home that's something that is of more value, right? So real estate would be a prime example, right? And so money rushes into real estate as a store of value, and then real estate goes up in price, and the rents go up in price to pay for the real estate, and all of the people that are below the asset line get killed because they can't pay the rents.
So and the equivalent on the stock market is companies doing share buybacks, keeping their stock price high. But the value of the currency is dropping, meaning people can buy less with it, and you propagate the problem.
Yeah, so be a CEO of a public company that does stock buybacks, and I know today there's a whole bunch of those terrible CEOs that are doing stock wipe them out. It's a structural problem that governments have created, because if you're destroying the value of your cash, why is a CEO going to sit on cash, right?
Exactly.
It's a mistake to sit on cash, so they're trying to give it back to shareholders. But that's driving more and more dislocation into societies, because the rich are getting way richer, because of an unnatural gift, because you're printing that much money. And ironically, you're actually then having to pay all the people left behind to try to pay for the artificial prices that you manipulated in the first place.
You've mentioned that that either technology, in the book you mentioned technology deflation or cryptocurrencies might burst that bubble. In our recent conversation, you said Corona bursts that bubble. Do you believe that bubble is burst? And if that's the case, what do you see unfolding now happening?
You've seen it. You've read the book, so it wasn't Corona bursting the bubble, and it wasn't cryptocurrencies. The bubble was going to be burst anyways. And I said this in the book, but it's like trying to fight gravity by flapping your arms, right? You're not going to stop technology deflation. It's actually, COVID just accelerated it. Look at Zoom. Zoom went from 10 million users to 200 million users in a month. How many of those users? But now it's not going to go from 200 million back to 10 million. And the gap is the gap of, and that gap that's not going back is the gap in commercial real estate prices. Right?
Wow. Okay.
Right. So the commercial real estate prices, why the Fed bailed out the $2.3 trillion junk bonds, is effectively, if commercial real estate prices fall, it looks like subprime. And it goes everywhere. And so when you connect the dots to what's happening, you can see it. And the amount of printing, just like the exponential technology is driving this way, the amount of printing to pretend we live in the same economic model that we used to has to exponentially rise the other way.
And basically, we're just taxing our kids with this, kicking the can down the road, short-termism, etc.
It's worse than taxing our kids. It's far worse than taxing our kids. If you can continue to do that, you have revolutions and wars.
So essentially, we have an economic explosion on our hands happening, either triggered by Corona or happening soon. How do you get out of this?
So this is a policy problem today. The problem is too big. So there are no easy solutions, and everybody is talking about easy solutions. What you just mentioned, short-termism, easy solutions. There are no easy solutions because we didn't let the system reset in 2008 or reset before. So
and our governments don't want to let the system reset now either.
Exactly,
as we can
see. So let's just look at both things before we go into potential solutions. Let's go. So keep doing what we're doing. Essentially, we've completely warped capitalism, and we're changing the currency unit underneath the value of trade. Every government has their own currency. Every government is printing that currency, and then you can't trust global trade, right? And what happens in that is you drive more dislocation into society, then you essentially enrich some at the price of others, at the cost of others. You drive revolutions and wars. You're going to get further and further dictators, people that are essentially creating. It's not your fault, the person that lost everything else. It's that person's fault there. And eventually, if you keep doing that, the people on the bottom of the pyramid rise up with pitchforks and they take the assets back anyways. Right, that's what it looks like, and so that path is the path we're on right now.
Got it.
In fact, the reason I wrote the book is to try to stop being on that path. So the other path, let it fail, what capitalism calls for, right? Let it fail. Unfortunately, now the problem is so big that you would enter a global depression. Prices would reset everywhere. Prices of assets would collapse. Banking system would collapse because they own the loans against that. Governments own the loans on top of that, and the system would reset. In a global depression that would look like the 30s, even though that's the right thing to do, how could any policymaker determine to do that? So those are the two kind of problems. Those are the two solutions that are problem sets right now. What I would say from a policy perspective, and this ladders into a lot of the stuff you're going to talk about, and there's you see this all different industries, how fast technology is moving. If an individual country, instead of taking the money and propping up the existing system, took the money and doubled down on technology, they would win more of the scarce jobs going forward, right? And I mean big bet. In other words, that bet would look like back in the 30s. You'd build roads and bridges, right? The new superhighways are all technology.
Right.
That's the future. That's where the jobs are going to be. But the jobs there are not globally going to increase past the jobs that they destroy. So for an individual country, that's what you do from a policy perspective, because you'd win more of the future.
Got it.
You're in that environment as well. In what's happening in that environment, you're also losing trust of currencies. And so you talked about Bitcoin and everything else, and it's not that I'm a huge pro Bitcoin and everything else. I can't even believe I'm saying this, but in that environment, what is a currency value? Why is a currency valuable? Right? It's just a unit of trust, a unit of exchange. And if you gave me money, or you lent me money, you lose your utility of money for now, and I gain utility of money. And if you keep lending me money and I gain utility and you lose it until I pay you back with interest. If I then pay you back with booth dollars, that I change the functional currency and I pretend to pay you back, but I actually haven't paid you back the real value, you lose trust in that exchange. And so Bitcoin out of this is likely a more trusted exchange.
So I'm going to repeat something you said to me, and you and I had a conversation a few days ago, that in the short term there'll be a flight to the dollar, and in the medium term, as the dollar drops in value, some national currency on the cutting edge will go, let's peg our net currency to Bitcoin, and then boom, that floods. Yes, still agree with that comment?
Yeah, I still agree with that comment.
Okay.
Right now, go ahead.
No, I think we have to wrap it up here. I just want to reiterate what you just said at the beginning, that we have printed $186 trillion in money over the last 20 years to generate $46 trillion in GDP.
That's right.
And so we're exponentially growing debt to incrementally grow GDP, not a sustainable situation. Jeff Booth, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks very much.